was under the mistaken idea that I could make him happy. And I tried for 9 years. And it was impossible. And I've come to realize happiness is an inside job. It's not anyone's responsibility to make another person happy. And so I think in my case, divorce was the best solution.
Welcome to the Yearning Heart podcast, where we discuss with everyday people our journeys towards love, our growth, and the yearnings of our hearts. Hello, I'm Jennifer Lear, your host. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm the founder of We Consult, which is a relationship app to help you improve your relationships. Today's guest is Kirsten, and Kirsten was married for 9 years. She's been divorced for 12 years. She has 2 adult children who she's raised. And today she talks a lot about her growth path, how the divorce of her parents affected her, how she chose over and over people with addiction issues, and what she's currently looking for. And I hope you enjoy the podcast and it helps you with your own relationships. Today we have Kirsten, who's going to be talking to us about her growth path and what she's learned in the course of her life, her relationships, what she learned from her parents' relationship. And my first question is, when I start bringing up this idea of relationships, what comes to your mind?
So I think what comes to me now is finally humility and learning, because I would say my biggest teachers have been people I've been in relationship with, not only about learning about them, but the most learning that's gone on for me is my own patterns and my own habits in relationship with another person. Some of them are good. Some of them have been very bad, or that's a harsh word. Some of them have been less productive, I would say.
Some of your relationships.
Patterns, yeah, as far as what I've seen in myself.
Okay.
As far as my patterns that come up in relationship.
So let's start with your parents. How did your parents' relationship impact your relational growth path and your growth path?
So I was 7 when my parents got divorced. I have 2 older sisters that are 8 and 6 years older than me. And then I have a brother who's 4 years younger than me. And it was very abrupt. My mother moved me and my younger brother in with my stepfather and her, and my older sisters stayed with my father. So, and my father and sisters stayed in my childhood home. And so I lost everyone I trusted. I'd only met my stepfather once. And then I was moved in with him. And my older sisters and my father were my trusted caregivers. My mother was not really my trusted caregiver. It affected me in the way that I really lost trust for the world and people in relationship, because at the age of 7, I felt like there was something wrong with me, that I was moved from my childhood home and my sisters and my father. So that's from then on how I interpreted the world.
Yeah. So you did something that's really common. You did what kids often do, which is they blame themselves when something goes wrong.
Yes.
And how did that impact you?
Yeah, so I became a pleaser, a people pleaser, and I made it my goal to never be abandoned again. So I was very pleasing always to any man, a relationship, romantic relationship, I should say. I became a bit of a chameleon. I would try to see what they were looking for and try to make myself into that person. And then on the flip side, I never trusted anyone I was in relationship with. And that's my romantic relationships. I would say as far as friendships, the pattern wasn't quite as strong. I
Uh-huh.
was a bit more authentic with my friends.
And the reason you didn't trust was because of the disruption, the abandonment by your father and your mother sort of taking you away and putting you with this person that you didn't even know.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how was your relationship with your stepfather?
So in my family, one of the family unspoken truths was to not feel. And if you were going to feel something, it needed to be positive. So I wasn't really allowed to express my anger or my dislike for my stepfather. I was always made to feel guilty for those feelings.
Mhm.
So I grew up with a lot of unreleased, suppressed emotions of anger and dislike for my stepfather.
Right. Okay.
But I was also a people pleaser, so I hid it.
Right. So you had these feelings that you hid,
Yes.
but you were aware of them?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So it's like a
Okay.
kind of a backpack of bricks I grew up with.
So tell me now about your relationship with your first husband. How did that go? Why did you end up getting divorced? How did you choose him?
I had been single for a year, and I was set up on a blind date by my brother-in-law, and we I was graduating college, so I was in a major transition about what I would do next with my life. And we had kind of a fun time. And I visited each other long distance. I really jumped into physical relationship much quicker than I've ever done in the past. And the words were spoken, I need you. Those were the magic words that he said. And I continued to be pretty reckless with my cautions about getting pregnant, and I got pregnant. Mhm.
Uh-huh. Is that why you got married?
And that's the biggest reason I think both of us got married, because I think I definitely had in the back of my mind that I was too immature to get married, probably. Um, that I but that was kind of an unconscious thought. So
Mhm.
I didn't want my child to not be involved with his father. And I was just gonna keep moving forward and not think too much about it.
So you got married, and then what happened that you got divorced 9 years later?
I was 24 at the time that I had my son, and I was already married. We'd just gotten married, I would say 4 months before he was born. And we lived for 9 years in a location that did not feel supportive to me. It was very isolated. And so there was a lot of addiction issues, alcoholism, and which is definitely in my family background, in his family background. So I've attended Al Anon for a long time, so I've learned more about the disease of alcoholism, that it is a disease and that it causes abusive patterns for people. He had times where he was very supportive and kind and generous and fun, but just more and more So just the stress I could see for both of us of a new home, a new baby, then two babies, the financial strain, all of that stress. And our relationship, we didn't build a foundation. We kind of both just rushed in without getting to know each other.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't have a lot in common, very different interests. I would say our common interest was to parent
Mm-hmm.
and have a family, but I just was done with the location we were living, and so um, I had since moved to. We both did actually, and spent part of a year here together. It was me coming into a supportive community and being around my best friend who made some observations about how I was treated, and he fell back into alcohol and addiction patterns. And there was just a moment where things were said and actions were taken that was the final straw, because my little 6-year-old daughter was watching and my 9-year-old son was watching, and I kind of had disassociated and went to the top of the ceiling where we were living. And I thought, I don't want my daughter to see her mom being treated like this.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really for my daughter, the love of her, that I left this relationship, because it just wasn't okay. It wasn't okay for children to see
The
that
behavior.
behavior.
Yeah. Right.
And then the following year, I actually went into counseling at domestic violent DVSAS. I'm not sure what the DVSAS. So I'm not
But
sure
it
what
was
those initials,
counseling,
but it was
counseling to deal with.
counseling directed at patterns of abuse. And that helped me realize that it was better for me to leave the relationship, to be solution oriented for my children,
Uh-huh.
rather than continuing in the pattern for the sake of keeping my family together. Even though, having seen my parents divorce and seeing the effect it had on me, I was sad that I was repeating this relationship pattern.
Because you didn't want to. You didn't really want to get divorced, but
No.
then you sort of felt like for the interests of your children, it was the best choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have any regrets about it now?
No, because I was under the mistaken idea that I could make him happy. And I tried for 9 years, and it was impossible. And I've come to realize happiness is an inside job. It's not anyone's responsibility to make another person happy. And so um, I think in my case, divorce was the best solution.
Mm-hmm. And so now you've been divorced for 12 years. What has your relationship learning and growth path been in these 12 years since the divorce?
I have had a 1-year relationship with a man, and then another relationship, and I've had a few dates here and there. But I've noticed that there's a there's a phrase, having a faulty
Mhm.
picker. So I have noticed that my picker has been off, so that has not given me a lot of confidence to really continuously date. I'll kind of try it and kind of get knocked down for who I'm choosing, and then get back up and try again. And then a lot of my energy has really been providing a stable, healthy home for my two children. So now that they're launched, I am, as far as romantic relationships, gonna put more energy into that. But
So tell me about what you call your picker problem. How do you see your picker? Like, how do you see yourself picking the wrong person? What's happening? How are you choosing? What criteria what's happening?
so after my divorce, I kind of made a commitment to myself to abstain from dating anyone with heavy addiction problems. So the first man that I met who I really was drawn to, and I was in counseling at DVSAS at the time, I found out he was an alcoholic, so I chose friendship with him. And then the next man I dated had a daily pot habit and chose not to stay in that relationship. So I guess I had a picker for people who are looking to be taken care of
Mm-hmm.
and people who were substance dependent in a pretty big way.
Now, how does this pattern relate to your relationships with both or either of your parents?
My mother is an adult child of an alcoholic. My grandmother, who I spent from the time I was 6 weeks old, I spent a lot of time with her, was an alcoholic.
Is this your mother's mother?
My grandfather was a sex addict. My stepfather is a gambler, was a gambler. And there's, I guess you could say we all choose our way of escaping ourselves. So I
Mm-hmm.
was looking to be with a person to escape myself. So
Mm-hmm.
really looking at this pattern of mine over and over. Because for me, I'm the codependent, not to use program words, but I'm someone who escapes myself by taking care of someone who needs to be taken care of. And
And that started, sounds like, with your grandmother.
yeah, it started very young.
You
I
learned,
learned to read. I don't know where these patterns come from. I learned to read a room very early, be pretty hyper vigilant, always vigilant, because for some reason, with people with addiction issues, the mood can change pretty fast. And there's a self preservation that was there for me for whatever reason, very young.
right.
And that felt comfortable. So I'm really looking at now moving forward, not so much what is comfortable, but what is healthy, and not always chasing chaos, but looking more for kindness and serenity. And, because I don't know, alcoholics can be pretty fun.
Yeah.
They can be exciting. And oh man, they can, not to say that I'm perfect and not chaotic, but at least on an emotional level, there's always someone flying off the handle. So, yeah.
Right. So you've been comfortable with that pattern,
Hmm.
even though part of you isn't comfortable and wants something different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as you've had these 12 years, like I know you've done some therapy and you've done 12 step work, like what is really helping you? What are you seeing differently and what's helping you evolve?
Uh, I would say it's positive brainwashing of the program. I mean, because I am a big fan of the Al-Anon program. I feel like it's a very sophisticated program. And what it has led me to is happiness with myself rather than self-loathing. A genuine sense of self-love that I don't need to sparkle, I don't need to morph, I don't have to be all positive qualities. I'm going to have some not so great qualities, and I can love those too. And so my perfectionism has taken a back seat, and my desire to be a chameleon has definitely taken a back seat, especially in relationship. It's okay to be displeasing if you're being honest with yourself.
Right. So you are choosing honesty over self-honesty
Self-honesty.
over keeping other people happy
Yeah.
because that's not your concern anymore.
Yeah. So that's really genuine empowerment,
Right.
in my opinion, for myself. And yeah, so kind of learning to love myself 100%.
And then let's just jump to your parents briefly. So your parents got divorced when you were 7, and they both got remarried, I believe.
Yep.
And how did each parent impact you? You talked about how the divorce impacted you, but you didn't really talk about how your father impacted you or how your mother impacted you or the step parents, how they really impacted.
So as far as how they impacted me, well, I think that's a tricky. So I'll go to my mom and stepfather first. I think it's a tricky thing being in a relationship as an adult, so my mother and stepfather, and where your loyalties lie. Do they lie with the children?
Mm-hmm.
Do they lie with the partner?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you balance that as an adult? And so my stepfather did a really good job of being loyal to my mother, but also being very supportive and loyal to her children. I mean, he really took on being a step parent, never overstepped. He really didn't become controlling or directive. He was very considerate that way. So he was a very fun and supportive parent, and at the same time was very loving and kind to my mother. I mean, he was never an easy person, but he was never abusive that I saw, or he had a short temper, but
Mm-hmm.
I would say that was really positive, that transition. So
Okay, so even though you sort of got thrown into this new relationship, it turned out that he was more or less a good person for you.
yes, I mean, I definitely had issues with him, but as far as that went, um, you could tell he really cared about all of us children.
Great.
And then my stepmother, so my dad remarried when I was 14, so he was single for 7 years. And what was difficult for my brother and I is that we had my father to ourselves for 7 years. And so we had all his loyalty, all his attention.
And that's when you visited him because you were living with your mother.
Yeah, I mean, we did have joint custody. So there
Okay.
was there was going back and forth. So my when my father remarried, we saw his loyalty transition to my stepbrother and my stepmother. And that was difficult for me to embrace. My father is conflict avoider. He avoids conflict. When there are times that we thought it would be good for him to stand up for my brother and I, he didn't enjoy the arguments that would occur. So he would tell my brother and I what my stepmother wanted, and then we needed to do it. So, and there were double standards for my stepbrother and my brother and I. So that was difficult. So it felt a bit like a betrayal to me.
Well, it
There was
sort
a
of
lot of
was.
therapy around that.
You've done a lot of work around that. What happened then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of adulting with that one.
Yeah.
Because I would say what I've learned in going through therapy and acknowledging the feelings that I didn't acknowledge at the time is that people do the best they can. And
Right.
they are
Well,
who they
that,
are. And there's nothing I can do about that,
but you still had feelings about
but
it.
I had feelings about it. And as a child, my survival was dependent on my parents. So,
And because your father was the more trusted parent, it was probably a bigger betrayal
yeah.
when he remarried and everything flipped around.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because mother, my mother does not have a nurturing bone in her body. She's a lot of fun. But yeah, the nurturing definitely came more from my father. Mhm.
Right. And your father had a big gap in the nurturing once he remarried and had other considerations.
Yeah. Yeah, which is just part of, I think, being in an adult
Right.
marriage.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So at this point, you have probably a yearning for a new kind of relationship, I'm imagining. And I'm wondering, what is it that you, in terms of love and relationships, what exactly are you looking for? What are you yearning? What is your heart's desire?
That's a good question, Jennifer. I would say I, of course, would love a partnership. And it's kind of a general word, but I'm really looking for is some reciprocation. Um, yeah,
Reciprocation.
when I offer kindness, that the kindness is reciprocated. When I offer generosity, that the generosity is reciprocated. And that there's a bit of self-reflection for a reciprocation of self-reflection. Like, oh, I'm feeling really grumpy and critical right now. Instead of taking it out on my partner, I might take a moment to reflect.
Hmm.
So, a relationship where a bit more reflection is a priority, and that because through all this work on myself, I realize I am my best teacher. So my partner is going to be their own best teacher. I don't need to teach them, if that makes sense. So,
It sounds like you don't want to teach them,
no, so someone that is willing to do their work. I
and
don't
you
know if
don't
that
have to have a
makes,
project
and I don't need a project because that's not fair to them. So,
or you.
or me, yeah, because I was under the illusion that not only could I make my ex-husband happy, but I could fix him. If I
Right.
could just make him happy and give him the right answer, he wouldn't need to drink. And that's,
Right. If you were a good girl, a good
yeah,
wife,
yeah,
he would be a different person.
yeah. Just like
It
if I'd
doesn't,
been a good girl, my parents wouldn't have gotten divorced. So just those
right.
early patterning. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's good. Do you have a more specific image of who this person will be, or is it very vague right now?
I have hopes about this person, but specifically, they have a good regard for themselves, but not in a narcissistic way. I'm enjoying my life and myself and my interests, And I hope it's someone that has a similar joy for life and their interests, and a curiosity, someone that is curious. If I were to put qualities out there specifically, it would be curiosity, a love of laughter, and an ability to self-reflect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those would be 3 important things for me.
Thank you for joining me in this podcast. I hope you found it both interesting and informative. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe on whatever channel you like to use. You can also find me on social media, usually under Reconcile. And just a reminder that we have a relationship app called Reconcile out to help you create your best relationship. And it's in both the Apple App Stores and the Google Play Stores.